up into the first quarter of the Philadelphia 76ers. And there's the magic phrase, right? First quarter. Yeah, I got the check mark. All right. And I know the boss is a little heated. I understand it because the boss has been doing this a long time. And the boss has also been in a very fortuitous situation where he has been able to grow his social media presence over the past, I don't know, it's got to be 10 years, right? That at least Sean Brace has been on the air in Philadelphia. So I understand it, where he's looking around, I'm the boss of a sports talk radio station in Philadelphia that's branded by iHeartRadio. Absolutely, I deserve the check. And you know what? He's 100% right. Don't blame me. If you want to blame an individual, if you want to blame a human being, I would start with Matt Mullen at Philly Voice for allowing me to write this weekly column and have my Twitter bio, most importantly, in that so I could link back to it. It's an algorithm. It's an algorithm. It's a computer. It's an algorithm. I applied via one of the 6 ways you can in your bio. I was telling this to Harry Mays of the famous Swing It and Ding It podcast you hear right here on Fox Sports Radio, The Gambler. I was telling Mays earlier on the show that we do. I was telling Brace just now, go through the application process. Just get a verified place to where you can write something once a week, put 3 columns out, have your bio there, and then you're good. All right? Now, the Philadelphia 76ers, where we have to start, and that's all I can tell you as far as the blue check. I'm sorry. It'll come up later in the show. I know, I promise. Corey Parson, the fantasy exec, is going to join us at 6:30. Anthony Gilbert at 7. And then we're going to talk about the Sixers game as it happens. But let's be honest here, okay? This is a situation for the Philadelphia 76ers in which they're not going to lose. No, it's not going to happen. You want to bring it up for fodder. You want to bring it up for discussion. You want to bring it up for the hypothetical. I'm all for it, okay? I'm not here to tell you out there how to have a conversation about the Sixers tonight. But what I will tell you is this is one of those times in which the narrative is going to play out, all right? It's one of those times where you know exactly what's going to happen. And really, if you're afraid, you're concerned, you're astute, and you realize that the value is completely gone for where this thing is opened up. The first person I saw jump in on this, my boy Laffy there at Awesome, I think had it at 4.5 is where it moved rapidly to where we are now at 6.5, maybe even 7 if we're crazy enough before tip here in this area. As you know, we just keep pounding 6.5. Yeah, here, take my money. The value is gone. It's clearly over. But from a pre-flop standpoint, there are other elements we can take advantage of. Here's the reality. And we rarely come out and tell you right away to lay one of these bets individually, so you know that there is going to be something that we're going to anchor it around. But my goodness, what are you doing? It's at minus 300. Look at the value that you lost. This thing was in the low twos at one point. 300, it's over. All right, well, let's work this. And forget about the second game for just a second. We'll try and work something in here with the Philadelphia Phillies, especially Drew Smyly on the mound tonight against the Phils. But the Sixers are minus 300. There is where you begin. That's how you build a ticket. Maybe you've got eyes on something in the French Open. Maybe you're looking ahead this week in the PGA. Maybe you're thinking, that Mercury line seems a little suspicious, a little short tonight against the Dallas Kings. So you're going to lay points in the WNBA. Whatever the hell it is that you are going to do, there is a great opportunity to anchor a couple of bets, if not all of your bets, with the Philadelphia 76ers. That's it. At minus 300, the value is gone. But you know what? At the same time, you're still locked in to a reality. I mean, think about it. Just think about it from a narrative standpoint. And yeah, we'll talk about the 2 big names that are going to impact this game, and those are officials more so than anything else. And this is not a blame the officials show. We never do. This is not a look back and say, the reason why the Eagles didn't win a Super Bowl for 50 plus years because the officials kept screwing us. No, it's not that. We never do that. But referees, officials, umpires, these people are human beings. They have tendencies. They impact games, especially when you've got not one but 2 who refuse to let teams play on the perimeter, and the defense just significantly is limited and hampered. But the game itself at minus 300, forget the line, forget the total. This is about anchoring plays. This is about finding that one play in which you can say, all right, this makes sense. This makes sense about working the Sixers anchor. How do they lose this basketball game? Joel Embiid gets in foul trouble? That's still not going to be enough. Still. Because at no point, if Embiid is out there healthy, which I think we all believe he will be, right? There is no assumption or even belief that this young man won't be out there playing tonight. The guy played through the torn meniscus 30-plus minutes and maybe looked a little slow on defense at times, but still lost 0 step on offense and was still a monster on both sides of the floor. So I don't really know what we would be talking about except maybe resting him up for the trip to Atlanta and limiting his minutes. But you only really do that if you're down, or pardon me, up. When you're down like they were, or anywhere near remotely close to just being down like they were in game 1, you're still going to force minutes out of Joel Embiid out of necessity. You're not going to go down 0-2 back to Atlanta or to Atlanta with something going on with Joel Embiid. It's not going to happen. You're going to make sure that you max out what you can with Embiid unless he's physically unable to go. And there's 0 indication from what we've seen that he's physically unable to go. All of that back around, Joel Embiid tonight, the Philadelphia 76ers, look, this is not going to be a Dallas, LA Clippers scenario. The Sixers are a better team than Atlanta. You can look at 2 things exclusively. You can look at the Philadelphia 76ers in game 1, absolutely horrific in the first half. Awful mistakes made in the first half. Brutal decisions made on the floor, on the bench. It was humiliating at times to watch this Sixers team go down, not double digits, at that point, 20 points. I mean, it was horrific of a scene. They make some adjustments. They put the pressure on the Hawks. They sneak back in. All of a sudden, Atlanta forgets how to move the basketball, and bam, it's a one-possession game at the end. I get it. There's some things that are positives to build on, but it should never be in that position to where we're trying to justify, explain, or at least come to grips with something so bad as what the Philadelphia 76ers, that product that they displayed on the floor in the first 20 to 30 plus, really 36 minutes, you could argue. It was atrocious at times. It was insulting. I mean, anybody in a group chat, anybody talking to friends who are outside of this city who are rooting for somebody else, or because maybe they know you well enough and they think, well, I'm just going to fade whatever the hell you are because, yeah, you're my friend, but I still hate you. I don't know what it is. Any of these dynamics, any of these crazy, weird, bizarre type dynamics. See, you can't defend what we saw on game 1 from the standpoint of both coaching and execution. But I think we can look at a very healthy narrative here. And we can turn around and we can bet that healthy narrative here. And that's the Philadelphia 76ers are going to pound, or at least try to pound, this Atlanta team into the dust as early and as often as possible. Doesn't mean that they're even going to cover this now 6.5-point spread. But what it does mean is that the Philadelphia 76ers, with the pendulum that we see often swing back when a team loses that game 1 that's favored in the playoff series, yes, the 1-4, the 2-3 second round is a really strong opportunity right now for the Philadelphia 76ers to smash this game. And look, here's another element to this narrative before we talk about, unfortunately, one that we can't control. And as sports bettors, I think there are areas that we can control, and that's betting on the human element from the player's standpoint, and this is all narrative speaking, versus officiating, where good luck, brother. Like, good luck trying to get ahead of that. We're going to try our damnedest, but that is as close to an imperfect science as you can find on this planet. We have at least a small opportunity now with the Sixers to look at how Atlanta, due to human nature, Atlanta's down. This is like the play-in game. You're going to see the same scenario here. Atlanta's down 10, 12 points somewhere in the first half. And I'll give you the benefit of the doubt if you think that for whatever reason, the Hawks are going to come out smoking and there's going to be a lot happening here. This is what I would say to you. You know, they come out smoking, and you start to see a 12, 14-point lead by the Philadelphia 76ers, you're going to start to also see some disengagement, to say the least, from the Atlanta Hawks. You're going to see guys just be like, all right, look, we got one. And yeah, they're still going to be out there trying to knock down shots, still going to be out there trying to get buckets over Embiid, still going to be out there trying to get around Simmons/Thibault, but there is also going to be the sense of, all right, you take a possession off or two. And that builds up in the second half. And all of a sudden you're down 20 and you look around, the bench is out there, and you think to yourself, okay, and you're going to see that. My prediction is you will see a ton of Atlanta Hawks on the bench tonight living out that Alonzo Mourning gif, wherever you are on the spectrum of age. Living that small clip out, right? Where he's sitting on the bench shaking his head, and then he realizes, okay. And then he starts to shake his head, yes. And he's like, yeah, okay, I can accept that. I think a lot of you are going to be seeing that from the Atlanta Hawks tonight. Sixers going to just beat the brakes off Atlanta. And this is not Homer. This is just what we see in the NBA. Look, if this were a tight game and no team was up major by any means, and you had many paths to a Hawks victory or a Sixers victory, and it just so happened to play out due to game flow and a tight game circumstance that the Hawks got one or the Sixers got one, we'd approach this game much differently. But I don't know how you can look at this game and honestly anticipate that the Philadelphia 76ers, who have established that they are one of the top, I'd argue now too, based on how Milwaukee has simply been undressed by the Brooklyn Nets teams in the East all season, that they're this bad at home and can lose two straight where Embiid is playing 30-plus minutes. What? Can you just please take a second and comprehend how that can play out? Please. What are the odds? Fox Sports Radio, The Gambler. It's presented by Cure Auto Insurance. Again, at Shander Show. Hey, get me here on Twitter. We're live across all platforms on Twitch. We're going to chat with Corey Parson, the fantasy exec, NBC Sports Edge, coming up in about 16 minutes, really. If I were to be specific, I don't know why I went 14 when it was 16. It was on the other end of them. But here's what I'd say. 7 o'clock, open up the second hour into the Sixers game. We'll chat with Anthony Gilbert and get some more perspective. Now, of course, with Corey, we have another game too later, and we'll hit on a couple of things, including some DFS angles. But, man, this thing here with the Sixers, just kind of looking at where the money has been piling in, we're getting closer and closer, just over an hour and 15 minutes away. And as you would expect, a lot of money on the public side of it has moved this line. Not nearly as much as the Jazz, mind you. Wow. Look at the difference. All right. The difference here is that the Hawks were getting a third of the public money. Now, the bets are pretty much split, 58-42. You're still in that 55-45 range. That's kind of what I look at. 50-50 is ideal, but you're really, if you get that, fantastic. But 55-45, I think, is a sweet spot. You can start to justify a 60-40 split, but I think for the most part, we're looking at 65, or in this case, 58-42. So you're in a good range as far as a public bet pretty much set down the middle. The money, on the other hand, is 2/3, 1/3. The money on the Sixers, 65% of the public bets. And look, we're well north here of 30,000 tickets, so a lot of bets have come in. This market has been established where 65%, so 2/3 of the public money, is on the Philadelphia 76ers to cover the spread. Now, we've seen this thing jump 2 full points, in some cases 2.5 full points. So you are going to see a lot of movement as expected retro from this line. On the flip side, and I don't know how much it may move even more. I think we're pretty much locked in right now, but just for kicks, you lay the 6.5, depending on where you are. It's juiced. 6.5 is juiced, by the way. So I wonder, Kyle, if you can, real quick, what do you have the Sixers at on DraftKings right now? Do you have them at 7 on DraftKings? I'm curious. Because what's the juice, though? 110 split? All right, so minus 107 Hawks versus plus 100 Hawks on Fox Bet. I thought maybe Fox Bet a lot of times will drop or raise a number by a half a point and adjust the juice accordingly, while the other books just give you that extra half point and keep the juice flat. But in this case, it actually is just a difference in juice. All right, look, if you're curious and interested, we just gave you right now on the air where to go as far as the best value if you were taking the Hawks and the points. But I'm thinking you're pretty much going to be locked in right now at 6.5. One of these books might get cute and open this thing at 7 for a little bit of, I don't know, maybe a window of 20 minutes and just to see, right? Just to kind of just hit you a little bit, buzz around, get you like a bug, gauge your reaction. Oh, man, that bug got him. All right. And then all the other bugs swarming. You might be able to make a lot of money on Atlanta if you bump this thing up to 7 right now. This thing has been sweating around 6 for the most part. And you really might be able to get some decent value on the return at least. Now, if you wanted to just bump this thing up, like I said, the play here would be the Sixers. The later game, I would just take the Clippers on the money line. Really, I mean, LA has not needed to travel a lot for this series. The big focus tonight is going to be on the officials with the Hawks and the Sixers. And I'll tell you about that before we break for Corey and kind of how to get around that. But you have a pretty decent return of plus 193 to parlay the Sixers, who are at minus 300, and the Clippers at plus 120. If there's going to be a dog that wins tonight, it's going to be the LA Clippers in the NBA. The Atlanta Hawks are cooked. Now, this is not a confidence bet, slam the hell out of the Philadelphia 76ers at minus 6.5, but I'm also not hating it. If you couldn't get in, the window is shut, but you still like this number, yeah, I think you're going to see a pretty convincing game tonight. As far as the Sixers, where they struggled, will be cleaned up, and Ben Simmons to Matisse Thybulle are going to have just a better game on Trae Young. Doesn't mean that Trae Young's going to disappear. There's no way in hell he's going to disappear. But the Sixers can play better defensively. The Sixers can get better productivity offensively and still allow Trae Young to get 25, 30 points and win that game really handily against the Hawks by 10 to 12 points. I mean, that's a strong reality. And there's this other element where you do kind of have to play the officiating out as well. But I think this play here makes the most sense. If you want the 3.5 points, I'll give you the difference on that. It's a little bit of a swing when it comes to the juice, but to be fair, both of these plays make sense. Look, the return of minus 300 for the Philadelphia 76ers and the Clippers getting the 3.5 on the road in Utah at minus 110 is, well, a little bit lower than I thought. All right, so it's minus 110, basically. Not bad. It's not terrible in that regard, but you're pretty much, no, it's a little bit better than that. I take that back. But it's not a great, this is pretty much assuring yourself that, oh no, that's why it wouldn't let me rock that in. These were singles. Jeez, tell you, try to go around to these different apps, and sometimes you have one up just to make sure that you're not missing any value. And you realize that it still hasn't refreshed from like 3 refreshers ago. But anyway, that return on the parlay is plus 155. That makes a lot more sense. I'm thinking to myself, what the hell is going on here that it wouldn't give me the update? But the Sixers minus 3, the Clippers at plus 3.5, minus 300. The Clippers at plus 3.5, minus 110 returns a plus 155. All right, you're in good shape there. Again, you may feel more comfortable in that regard. I'm okay with that. I'm not going to hate that by any means, but that would be the ultimate play. The difference here, though, with the officiating, and I think something to look at, is the Steve Foster, Tony brothers combination and how these guys love to call fouls. So how does that play out, right? We know that these guys are going to come in. We know that they are as keen on blowing the whistle as it gets, that you've got a pretty strong crew here of officials who are going to be active with the whistle early. And I think this is one of those where it's not like, oh, Joel Embiid just lost the MVP to Nikola Jokic, so he's going to come out firing. And we'll talk to Anthony Gilbert specifically about that at the top of this next hour. Corey Parson before that. But because I do think there's some motivation behind Embiid's performance tonight. A lot with that. But the officials, I think it's much more difficult to call, right? You look at, everybody thinks these officials are going to have a terrible adverse effect on the Sixers. Well, no, that's partly correct. I think you can make that statement if you mean that it's going to have an adverse effect on the Hawks, so long as you don't mean, oh, no, these guys are going to be able to play. They're not going to be able to play. They won't be able to play. So what happens is the officiating now turns into a major issue of slowing this game down early and also somebody getting into foul trouble. Now, I have set odds ahead of time of what I believe will be the odds of the first player, in this case, a player of note, to get their second foul in the first quarter. I think there's a general belief around the station, and I understand it, that I just show up and talk out of my rear. Is that accurate? Like, I think from Kyle's standpoint, since he's here with me, if it's Jansen, if it's our boss or one of our bosses driving home or anywhere around in the evening, I think it's a pretty easy misconception to reach that, all right, well, Chandler just comes in and talks out of his ass. He kills an hour and then just gets to live stuff. I understand that. I get that. And to be fair, there may be, I'm not admitting anything. This is not a court of law, nor is it the court of public opinion. But today and others are days in which we even set our own odds. We go above and beyond with the research that we set our own odds. Now, Kyle had no idea I was doing this ahead of time purposely so I could just spring it on him. We're going to break for Corey coming up, although he did just text me. I want to make sure that everything's still good before I break, set everything up, and go. Yes. All right. Make sure that I got it. Just a number issue. We're all good. But I'm going to set these odds here, okay? You ready, Kyle? Okay. So the scenario is Tony brothers, Steve Foster, these guys are so tight with the whistle. And in their history, their MO, they are going to blow the whistle hard in the first quarter, first half. Somebody, one big star here, is going to be in foul trouble. And I think there are a couple of different narratives about it, and we can explore it, and I'm going to come back to this. But I'm just going to hit you, like, you can reason and rationale it out as much as possible. I'm just saying we'll come back and have a more detailed conversation. I'm just going to give you the odds that I set, okay? Okay. Joel Embiid at plus 130. I think there is a very realistic chance that a big man can go down early, and that's Embiid. I also have Capella at plus 110 because he's guarding Embiid, and I think that's the more difficult matchup of the two with Capella on defense. Yes, sir. I have Ben Simmons, and I don't know if you heard the Doc Rivers comments, but he basically said to the media about the officiating if Ben Simmons is allowed to play defense. So he may have inadvertently put a target on Ben Simmons' back to be called a foul. And that's where I would say Simmons is now minus 110. There's also Trae Young at plus 130. That's where Embiid was. And then both Toby and Bogey, not Toby and Bobby, Toby and Bogey are each at plus 140. Well, look, it's going to be either Ben Simmons or Matisse Thybulle. And I think that's a fair assessment. It's probably going to be the two of them in waves more so than anything else. So I don't think. Yeah, but Thybulle doesn't, like, if Thybulle's in foul trouble, you can still outscore Atlanta at 130 to 120, right? You can still beat the brakes off them. It sounded like you were a little upset. All right, well, assume that Thybulle is not an impact enough player. Like, these guys are all, like, Toby and Bogey are tertiary players, right? Like the third star, if you will, on these teams. That's where I drew the line. Which is what I did. At least I thought I did. And then you are inserting Matisse Thybulle, already criteria on the list. Seriously, my level of expected return has risen now with this check. Okay, I like it. Yeah, plus 110. See, I gave you some value, and you were a smart individual. I did give you some value. All right. Corey Parson's going to join us coming up next. We have Anthony Gilbert at the top of the hour. There are a lot of things going on here, including looking more and detailed into this game tonight, both games tonight. It's What Are the Odds, Fox Sports Radio, The Gambler, presented by Cure Auto Insurance.